A very good evening to everyone present here tonight. My name is Brian and I will be your host for tonight. On behalf of the JPO family, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone tuning in for tonight's broadcast. We hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe indoors. A friendly reminder to maintain good hygiene at all times and maintain social distancing when heading out. As we'd like to continue improving your experience with us, please help us achieve this by completing the poll that will be published during this broadcast. To anyone who is interested in sharing tonight's broadcast, a live feed is being shared on the JPO YouTube channel. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to type them out in the Q&A section down below. For those of you joining us from YouTube, please leave your questions in the live chat down below. A recording of the webinar will also be uploaded onto the YouTube channel. Tonight's seminar features Mr. Ken Lam, with his topic being blending the experiences in the business world with music. As our JPO family attendees are mostly students ranging from primary school to college, their parents and their teachers, the sharing of knowledge and advice here for all of us tonight is invaluable and greatly appreciated. The JPO is very honored to have Ken join in as our guest for tonight. I hope that you'll all join me in giving him a warm welcome. Mr. Ken Lam is a conductor and musician with a fascinating background involving his career as an international corporate attorney, which he left to pursue a career in music. His legal career reached a peak during his time in London, where he worked at the world's largest law firm for 10 years, coordinating international business deals. This allowed him to travel the world during his business trips. He did, however, eventually make a decision that would change his life, leaving the corporate world behind and delving deeper into the world of music. Ken Lam has studied conducting under various teachers at several prestigious academies and conservatories, such as Gustav Meyer, David Zinman, and Leonard Slatkin. He had previously held positions such as Associate Conductor for Education of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, and as the Principal Conductor of the Hong Kong Chamber Orchestra. As an orchestra conductor, Ken has had many achievements during his career, including an award he won in 2011 from the Memphis Symphony Orchestra International Conducting Competition. He was also featured as a conductor in the League of American Orchestras 2009 Bruno Walter National Conductors Preview with the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. He started off his career with the National Symphony Orchestra at Kennedy Center in June 2008 as one of 4 conductors selected by Leonard Slatkin. Since then, he has performed with many renowned symphony orchestras in both the US and Hong Kong. He has also actively involved himself with various companies specializing in opera productions, some of which he has led and conducted, such as the Janney Opera Company at Brevard, North Carolina. These productions have even made their way to renowned venues, such as the Spoleto Festival of USA, the Lincoln Center Festival, and at the Luminato Festival in Canada. One such production, which was the Manet's Manon at the Peabody Conservatory, was even accredited by the Baltimore Sun as one of the top 10 classical events in the Washington, D.C. Baltimore area in 2010. In recent developments, Ken is the 2015 recipient of the Johns Hopkins University Alumni Association Global Achievement Award, given to individuals who exemplify the Johns Hopkins tradition of excellence and have brought credit to the university and their profession in the international arena. Ken currently serves as the music director of the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, the music director of Illinois Symphony Orchestra, the resident conductor of the Brevard Music Center in North Carolina, and he also serves as the artistic director of Hong Kong Voices. So without further ado, once again, a very good morning to Mr. Ken Lam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Brian.
Hello. So yeah, thank you for joining us this morning. So to start off tonight's interview, what can you tell us about the video that we had just watched?
Well, first of all, it's really nice to be here. It's a nice and bright and early morning in Charleston, South Carolina.
That's good to hear.
I can think of nothing better to do than to go on a Zoom meeting, which is, I guess, what we've been doing for the last 6 months, right?
Yeah.
But that video, it's interesting. Of course, that was a concert that I had, I think, last season with the Charleston Symphony. It's Johann Strauss's Frühlingsstimmen, Voices of Spring. It's and you will see that the video, the focus is all on the conductor. And that's something that we conductors have to do a lot. It's like, now I was interested. What is your instrument, Brian?
Sorry. Oh, my instrument is I would say violin and piano, I suppose.
Violin and piano. So, when you practice violin and piano, sometimes our teachers will tell us, record yourself and listen back, and then you can correct, and make it better, right? So imagine for a conductor what that means. That means, videoing our performances. And that's one of the hardest things to do. But we got to do it, so I put the camera there, record myself, and I look at it and I see, okay, well, I like this, I don't like this. Oh, why do I look so bad? Why did this didn't happen? And I try to get better. And that's actually one of the hardest things to do, is to look at yourself conducting or playing and actually criticizing yourself. And so I guess, I gave you that video really to start off a conversation. It's about, just how difficult this profession is, because your players are not really going to tell you how good or how bad you are. Usually they're happy to be there, they play and they go home. So for us to get better, we have to constantly really look at ourselves. So that was the video. I hope you enjoy the music.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the music. I'm sure the audience did as well. It was definitely very insightful regarding that. It didn't occur to me that you guys had to record yourselves to actually like see how you guys were doing it. Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. So how did you end up as a conductor? Like, did you have any music experience prior to leaving the corporate world?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, and thank you for that introduction, by the way. I'm from Hong Kong. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I assume it's quite similar in Malaysia too. Asian countries. We learn instruments, we study music when we were young, and in Hong Kong, we don't do a lot of sports because, as you probably know, Hong Kong is a very small place.
Yeah.
And I remember, our basketball court is triangular on top of a 16-story building. So we're not very good at sports in Hong Kong, and so we study music and we compete with school orchestras and so on. So every kid, so I studied like you, violin and piano, so I got reasonably good at it. And when I was a teenager, my parents sent me to England for boarding school, and that's when the passion really started, because in England, most of the kids there play rugby and sports. And I was not very good at contact sport like rugby. I'm just not. I wore glasses and just not. So I spent most of the time in the music school practicing, and I got better, and I was really interested in music. I fell in love with the repertoire. I went to a lot of concerts in London, and it was amazing. I saw Bernstein, I saw Nathan Milstein, and some really, really great people play. And but of course, as somebody who's from Hong Kong, I wanted to study music in college, but my mom would say, well, enjoy that as a hobby. Like, music is hard. You're not going to make a living. And so do something else. So I listened to my parents and I studied economics. But where I went to college, we had a lot of music going on. There are a lot of student orchestras, student choruses, university choruses. I participated in all of that, and basically just really enjoyed doing it. But I stuck with economics, and after economics, I did law. And then I went to London and trained as a lawyer, joined one of the big firms in London. Fortunately, that law firm is based near Barbican, which is where the Guildhall School of Music is. So what I did, I actually went to the Guildhall School of Music and studied violin as just a student who would just from the outside. So I would work until 7 at night, and then I go and have the lesson at 7. 8 o'clock, I go back to work. And that was how my life was. And 2 times a week, I went to concerts, and that was really great. And then I was in Hong Kong with the same law firm, because they have offices all around the world. And in Hong Kong, I started playing in a community orchestra. I started singing. And one time, sure enough, that I suspect this is how a lot of people started conducting. I showed up at a rehearsal, I was playing second violin, and the conductor didn't show up. So the chairman of the orchestra said, can somebody do this rehearsal? And so I put my hand up and said, oh, well, maybe I'll do it. And they apparently liked what I did. And I was sort of passionate and so on. I had no idea what I was doing, of course, but I was passionate. And so they decided to ask me back to conduct a concert. And that's kind of how I started conducting. And after a while, I thought, well, maybe um, I should learn how to do this properly. So I went to Europe for these conducting workshops. How does a conductor train? If you don't have an orchestra, it's very, very hard. So in Europe, they have these conducting workshops where teachers would go and they would hire an entire orchestra for 2 weeks and maybe have 14 students. And every day we have podium time. You get half an hour to conduct the orchestra and get instruction. And that's what I did. And what the teacher for one of these workshops was the renowned Gustav Meyer. And he passed away a few years ago, but he taught for many 20-some years at Tanglewood with Bernstein and Seiji Ozawa. He was director of Peabody Conservatory. And I asked him, how can I get better at conducting? And he said, come to Peabody. And so I thought, well, the law doesn't change very often, so maybe I'll take 6 months off and study conducting and maybe take a year off, and I can always go back to practicing. So that's how I came to the United States, where I'm based now. That was back in 2005. And studied conducting for 3 years, and then for some very fortunate reason, won an audition and had a position with the Cincinnati Symphony, then with the Baltimore Symphony, and then now, of course, I have my 2 orchestras that I'm music director of, which is the Charleston Symphony and the Illinois Symphony. And so I'm sort of, people ask me, how I am, and I would tell them, I've been on holiday since 2005, and I'm still really, really enjoying it. So that's a short version of my story.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that with us. Well, you did answer one of my later questions as well regarding why didn't you pursue a career as a musician rather than an attorney earlier on? But yeah, that was definitely interesting to hear. Sorry.
No, Brian, that's actually a very interesting thing. What I found was, and this is something musicians we learn, which is with music, we try to attain something really beautiful. You must have had that feeling, when you play an orchestra and everything is right, everything sounded right. And then you forget even that you're in the room, because you could have attended a concert where that happened. Just for a few moments, you forget you're in the room, you're somewhere else, you've taken over by the music. And that feeling is very addicting, because that, for me, is, you attain something really beautiful, almost a version of truth. And once you have experienced that, you want to get back to it. Now, I think in some other profession, you may have that feeling. I have no doubt that as a doctor, the feeling of, helping somebody get better, it's really wonderful. As a lawyer, it's the type of law that I did, which is very basically finance. It's, I get a rush, adrenaline rush when you complete a deal, yes. But ultimately, pretty much 24/7, we're talking about money. And after a while,
Yeah, I can imagine it would be very grounded as opposed to what you were just mentioning regarding music.
Yeah, and music is just utterly amazing. That it's this something that you can't really describe it in words, but when you experience it, you know it is, right? So that's kind of what drew me into taking that leap.
All right. Yeah, that was just kind of related to what I was just about to ask. Like, what was that final push that pushed you out of the corporate world? So I guess it would have been that addicting feeling. So yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. So do you ever miss the corporate life though?
Well, I miss my friends. I still have many friends. I still keep in touch with them. And but in terms of the people that I meet day to day, I've met some of the most interesting people, some of the most creative people, some of the kindest, most generous people in art. And I think art calls for that. If you're a conductor, you stand in front of an orchestra, right?
Mhm.
And if what you do is all about yourself and not about the music, the musicians will see it right away, and they will play accordingly, and your music will not sound great at all. So in music, we actually needs a certain a high degree of humility, a high degree of honesty, um, for it to work. And I am glad to say, for the most part, I find people in music of a very agreeable type.
Thanks. Well, thanks for your views on that. So can you tell us a little about your journey pursuing music while during your time in the US? Since like you
Yeah,
did play.
well,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was in my mid 30s when I came to the US to retrain myself because I already had a career in law. And so I felt I had to catch up because I didn't have a music degree. Sure, I'd read a lot of books, and so I was at Peabody. I took every single class, and I just worked really, really hard. Um, but then we're Asian, so we know how to work hard, right? So I did, and and I was also lucky. I think to be successful, especially in music, you can practice all you like, but you also have to be at the right place at the right time and meeting the right people. And I did. I was very fortunate to be accepted to the Aspen Music Festival for 3 summers. There, I met my other teacher, David Zinman, who is a very world-renowned conductor, and he recommended me to the Cincinnati Symphony, and that's how I still have to audition, but I was lucky enough to be recommended, and I got the job. And from Cincinnati, I got a position with Montclair State University in New Jersey, as well as the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, that continued my career. As you probably know, with all the news that's going on, the United States, it's to get a visa to go to the United States, it's not the easiest thing. And it's probably harder now than 10 years ago. And so if you don't have a job, you have to leave the country. And I was very, very lucky that every time, the visa come to renew, I actually managed to get a job. And from Baltimore, I got Charleston Symphony music director, and then the Illinois Symphony music director. And all this time, the summers I spent at the wonderful Brevard Music Center, which we can all see as Brian, your background is the wonderful lake at Brevard Music Center, which is in North Carolina, which is so pretty in the summer. So I've been very lucky. But then again, I think with music as with life, a lot of people think, okay, well, I got to get here, and then I got to do this, and then I got to get this step up, and so on. If we think like that, we'll never be happy. For music, it's actually all about the journey. So do I not want to conduct the Berlin Philharmonic one day? Sure. And who knows, right? But I think the most important thing is to enjoy what we do on day in, day out. I have a wonderful orchestra, two wonderful orchestras that I work with on a regular basis. I guest conduct, in the States, a lot in Asia as well, and I meet wonderful people along the way. Yeah, so yeah, that's why I always say I'm still on holiday.
Well, I can understand that. Like, it's more like especially with music, it's more that we enjoy the moment rather than plan for like what comes after and such as that such, isn't it? So yeah, thanks for sharing that view with us. So yeah, there was something that I wanted to ask, like how was it like, because like you said, back in England, you had to both work like a you had to both work a very probably a very time consuming job, and still manage to find time to like hone your skills with the violin and such. How was that experience? How difficult was it to manage your time doing both tasks?
Yeah, very difficult. I don't pretend to be a very good violin student at all. In fact, I was so bad. I always have to apologize to my teacher. Sorry, I haven't practiced much this week. But you try. You try. When you love music, you find time, but you can always. Well, that's partly why I'm not a violinist anymore, because I haven't really seriously played for 15 years. And but you grow as a musician in many different ways. In fact, you read, and you don't even have to read about music to grow as a musician, because what is music about? Music, it's when a composer writes music, oftentimes it's not just about the notes. It's about how they feel about the world. And to get a sense of how they felt about the world, you have to study philosophy, history, religion, somewhat, and architecture, fine arts, sciences, everything. And I think all of that really comes back to ultimately what you have to say about these notes in front of you. Um, so it's and that's what's so interesting about conducting, is that yes, you study the notes, but it's just so much more than that.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Because like you mentioned, you did have some past music experience, but how about your past music experience before you left the corporate world? But how about your experiences in the corporate world as an attorney? Did any of these past experiences as an attorney assist in your transition to the music industry? Could you elaborate a bit on this?
Absolutely. That's actually a very interesting question, because what does a conductor do? I think it's and how, and if we look at what a conductor really does, it actually, the corporate world actually gives you a lot of insights and skills. So what do? We start with a score like this one. Oh, well, the
Oh yeah.
background. There you go. You can sort of see it. It's Beethoven.
Yep.
Anyway, everyone's talking about Beethoven this year because it's his 250th birthday. But you started with a score and you study all the notes, right? So that you can learn how to do, with music theory, with musicology, and so on. That you can analyze. And then what you do, you come up with a concept, an oral concept of what you want to hear from the notes. And then you go to the orchestra. What is the orchestra? It's your instrument, right? Just like a violin or piano is your instrument. The orchestra is my instrument. What do you do with practicing the violin? You go into a room and practice scales and arpeggios and so on. How do you practice on an orchestra? Well, you actually have to go and rehearse them, right? And conducting is just about the only thing that the you don't expect to perform on the violin the first time you hold a violin, right? You just don't. You practice a lot and then you go. I think conducting is just about the only thing that you're expected to perform at a high level the first time you step up. That's the expectation, because they are there not for you to practice on. When you stand in front of an orchestra, you're expected to be ready. That's a big difference between an instrument and an orchestra. Also, an orchestra is not a piece of wood. An orchestra comprises of 80 human beings, is living. So as a conductor, you can learn how to beat time, 1, 2, 3, 4, and how to be expressive and all that. And you saw a bit of what I was talking about in the video, you try to be expressive and this and that. But it's all no good if the 80 people in front of you think you're a terrible person and we're not going to play for you, right? So they get to decide how much effort they're going to give you. So my job as a conductor also is to inspire those sitting in front of me, that and to persuade them to go with my vision of the piece. And I bet you anything at Jesselton, you do that. Maestro Yap does do this every day with especially with the students, because they are the ones that we have to inspire through the power of the music, and we have to somehow give them a freedom to express themselves, but we have to kind of control it within the framework. Basically, especially with professionals, if there's a big oboe melody, the oboists would have been practicing that melody for decades. They've probably been practicing it since they were in high school. And if you force the oboist to go with you every way with your gesture and your expression, he'll probably go with you, but he or she, may probably feel, yeah, I really want to express myself, but I'm not really allowed to. So the job of a conductor actually is to give them a sense of freedom, that they also have a part to play in the music making. And you inspire them on the podium and off the podium. So what would make this person who has a mortgage to pay, parents to look after, kids to look after, to spend 30 minutes before they go to bed to practice their music? A lot of them would do it out of their own responsibility, but how do you inspire them to give 10 more minutes to make that even better? So that's the kind of skill that is never taught in a conservatory or in a music school. That is something that's called life. That's leadership, that's management skills. And that's something you have to, like as an engineer, I'm sure the moment you join a big firm, they put you on these courses of presentation skills, people skills, negotiation skills. As a lawyer, I've attended so many courses about people management, about how to negotiate, how to get what you want from a negotiation. All of that. As a lawyer, you practice every single day in your work, and I bring all of that with me onto the podium. But of course, what I do on the podium, I've got to do it without speaking. And that's the hard thing about conducting, because it's a form of non-verbal communication. So how do you negotiate? By gesture and by facial expression, not by saying a word. Orchestral musicians, especially professional ones, they hate it when you speak too much. They said, why can't you show? Remember the conductor who said, play quietly, and he's conducting like this, But that's kind of a quick summary of the kind of thing, time management, also very important. And that's also something you learn from. You don't necessarily have to learn it from music. You learn it from lawyer, banking, engineering, medicine, everything. But I think all these years of experience of dealing with people, and with law, you deal with some of the most demanding people on earth. When you are working with transactions on Wall Street or the City of London, those are very high pressured environments. And you bring that to the podium. You bring all that skill, and it works.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot of people skills involved, like back when you were doing your attorney, that you have brought over with your to your conducting profession. So yeah, it was definitely a whole new set of views that you shared with the audience. So thank you very much for that, Ken.
No, not at all. There's so much to it. But again, it's what makes this bearable is that the end product is it's beautiful.
That's something we can definitely agree on. So, yeah, how about this one more thing though? Because other than like all the people skills that you mentioned earlier on, how about the level of connections that you made during your years as an attorney? Did this play a part in your development as a conductor, or were you forced to like forge a whole new set of links and connections with people within the industry from scratch?
Yes, I think I did have to because um, but I think it mainly it's because I went to a different country. So before I was in London and Hong Kong, and I went to the United States to study, and I didn't really know people in the United States. And now this is my home now, and I made connections here. So I have sort of two groups of friends. One is the friends that are sort of my age, and they are doctors and lawyers, and a lot of them in London and Hong Kong. And another group, it's much younger than I am, and they're all musicians here in the United States. It's fascinating. It, there are advantages of knowing lots of doctors and lawyers and engineers and so on. When they get to like well into the career, of course you look at them for their support and advice, and that's something I enjoy. And also I think it's important to know people that are not just in your own field. I think that sort of keeps you in balance. It reminds you that there's a world out there. Sometimes in the music world it can get very kind of small, and uh, the circle is small because you're only seeing the musicians that you're with, and I think it just gives you a good perspective of the world.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Ken. So yeah, before we move on to our another question, I would just like to remind our audience. So if you have any questions for Ken, please leave them down in the Q&A section down below. Or for those of you on YouTube, just leave them in the live chat and we'll address them shortly. So yeah, with that, I think we have one time for one more question before we move on to our Q&A section. So it would be the JPO. So we from the JPO have one more question from you. So as you may have heard, the Jesselton Philharmonic Orchestra has involved itself in a variety of activities. So on behalf of the JPO, we would like to ask about your views on the JPO and its activities, and if you have any suggestions on how we may further improve ourselves.
Well, Brian, I was so pleased to meet you and Maestro Yap earlier, and thanks to Maestro Yap, I got a very a good idea of what you do, and I've watched a number of videos on YouTube. I think it's such an important work, so important work that you do in not just Malaysia, right? In other countries too, because I think what we share is a love of music, and we understand the power of music to bring people together. We were talking about the educational values of music, and how musicians somehow seems to do better in other subjects when and they translate their skills to other subjects. And in order to continue the this tradition, we've got to give access to young people, and the community as a whole. Remember, I started off playing in like a Jesselton Philharmonic. I played in school orchestras and community orchestras. When I was in London, I played in the London Lawyers Orchestra, and they're all community groups. These are not professional outfits, and I was so grateful for those opportunities. I made a lot of friends, and no doubt part of the thing about what you do is that you find your. I'm sure you made a lot of friends in your years playing in the orchestras, and of course the music will never leave us, and will always be supporters of music, whether or not maybe every 10 of us, one of us will maybe go on and study music. But the rest, you'll be engineers, we'll be lawyers, we will be bankers and doctors, and we will always have an appreciation of music and support music. And I think music makes us better. And it's a cliche, we always say music makes us better, but I really do believe some music actually, like the slow movement of the Emperor Concerto, you listen to it from beginning to end. I guarantee you, after this interview, go and listen to the second movement of the Emperor Concerto, Beethoven. I guarantee you will become a better person after you listen to the movement. I certainly do. For some reason, that's the power of music. And that is something that is so important that we give to young people. And that's why I think what you guys do it's just so important. And I think and that's why you have the success that you have. You have the support that you have. And so I always admire people like Dr. Yap, and to be so generous to give his time and energy to run an organization like yours. So I think it's great. I mean, you asked me how you can improve. What can I say? I think, I think everyone should support the organization.
Thank you for your kind words, Ken. I'm very sure Teacher Outling will be very happy to hear you say all this. So yeah. So with this, I think we may have to move on to our Q&A section because we are running a bit short on time. So we do have a few questions coming in through the chat. So yeah, the first one would be from an anonymous person. He's saying, he or she is saying, "Hi Maestro, thanks for sharing your journey from the corporate background which translate to your work as a conductor. So in your opinion, for those who love music and have involved themselves in playing so much, but they chose to pursue other careers, do you think do you think what they have done will indeed help them later on in their work?"
Now, do we mean by, let's see, I see the question. For those who love music and have been playing so much, but choose to, do you think what they have done will indeed help them in their work?
Yeah,
what they've done in music will
I
help
think
them.
that's what he's trying to say. Yeah, what have they done in music?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of the other way around, right?
Yeah.
I absolutely. I mean, I think the skills, we were talking about this, right? I mean, just, maybe we just talk a little bit about that. An analogy I always talk to parents about is, why do students who learn an instrument or is in an orchestra, are they seem to be better at other subjects? They are sort of better at math or English or literature or whatever it is. And I would tell them that, in school, if you score 90% in a test, you're likely to get an A, right? I mean, it's pretty good. But I would then tell them, can you imagine an orchestra playing 90% of the notes right? And that's pretty disastrous, right? I mean, can you imagine a symphony orchestra playing 90% of it? That's terrible. So I think musicians who has studied music a long time, it's already got into their heads that 90% is not good enough. In music, you're always trying to hit every note right to do justice to Beethoven or whoever it is. And I think that mentality translates to pretty much everything else that we do. That, okay, we cannot settle for 90%. And I think that's why musicians seem to actually do well in other subjects. So in that sense, for a young person to learn music, I think is really, really helpful. I think playing in an orchestra is really helpful, not just from technical, but from a social point of view, because what you're doing in orchestra is you learn a skill that most people are not very good at. The skill that I'm talking about is listening. In orchestra, 90% of the time, we are listening. Now, of course, the conductors we would like you to watch us every now and then, but I would much rather you listen to one another and listen in a very deep way. Can you tell where the pulse is so that you can actually play with the pulse? Can you hear where the melody is so you can actually accompany the melody? Can you negotiate with your colleagues about pitch? Can you negotiate with your colleagues about, and then the people sitting in front, they are leaders. How do you lead your section? Those are all social skills that you actually learn in an ensemble from a very young age, especially if you have a good conductor, guiding you. What should you be doing? And the musicians then apply all of this, especially the listening, to the work that they do after, even if it's not music. I certainly did with law, because it's, when you're negotiating, it's actually very easy to just scream at each other. But of course, the most effective way is actually to listen first. And I dare say most people, that's our weakest thing, is we're so concerned that we are right, and we just say what we feel like and not listen. And orchestra especially teaches you to do that. So absolutely, I think it's very, very helpful.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that view with us, Ken. So yeah, we're getting a few more questions actually from YouTube. So there's one person named Asman A. So they are asking. So they are saying, "Hi, Mr. Lam. What's your opinion for making professional orchestras able to survive financially long term, especially once the whole COVID situation has passed?"
That's a very good question. As you know, orchestras are struggling right now, especially in the United States, where orchestras are funded by the private sector. In Europe, a lot of orchestras are funded primarily by the public sector, by the government. So they are in a slightly better position because the government has, lots of sources of funding. In the United States, we depend on mostly donations from private individuals, corporations, and foundations. And in time of COVID, uh, a lot of, well, certainly we are not able to perform. And so ticket sales are out. So it's very important for orchestras in the United States to keep the relationships with our donors, our foundations, our corporate sponsors, so that they continue to support the orchestras. Now, I'm an optimist. I think the orchestra, the classical music world has, if you look at the news headlines 100 years ago, they are worried about classical music dying, because there's a new genre called movies are coming out, television is coming out, so nobody's going to go to classical music now. Sure enough, classical music probably have lost a share of the entertainment market, because you remember 200 years ago, going to the opera is like going to a movie. That's how people did it. But I'm a great believer in adapting and reinventing ourselves. Orchestras have done that, and we're still around. Now, things have changed, no doubt, but I think just because of the innate value of the art, of the value of the symphonies of Beethoven, the symphonies of Mahler and Bruckner and so on, I do believe orchestras will survive. Now, the mode of the orchestra may be different. What's been hit the worst in the United States are the really big orchestras. They have 100 people on salary. Now, if you don't have any ticket revenue, it's very, very difficult to keep 100 people on salary. And so those are the big challenges. How do we adapt? Now, people are adapting. I can tell you how Charleston Symphony is adapting. We have just spent, quite a lot of money purchasing video equipment, high quality video equipment, and so on, to build a digital platform for the orchestra. So all of our concerts from next month, we will have in-person performances, but with social distancing, but also live streaming, but high quality live streaming. Now, I don't think live streaming will ever replace the in-person concert, because the live audience is part of the concert. The performer, I feel from the back of my head the energy of the audience. I don't think that will ever be replaced. I just long for the day we this pandemic is over and we get back to it. I think if for the people who are a little older, perhaps you will remember that in the early 2000s, we had SARS in Asia, especially in Hong Kong. And we had this, I had my choir sing with masks on and so on. So this is not the first time something like COVID has happened. It happened, 20 years ago. And we got through that and we survived. So I think we will, but time will tell how many orchestras will be hit permanently. I know of at least a couple who actually have shut down permanently because of this.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Once again, hopefully everything does settle down soon. But I can agree that it's just a matter of how well the orchestras can adapt to the current situation, I suppose.
Yeah, and Brian, can I maybe I just add one tiny thing to this, and that is why I think organizations like Jesselton is so important, because if the younger generation does not have not had a connection to music, they won't come back to it. We're always talking about, the classical music audience is older, like what happened to all the young people? Well, look, young people are busy. When I was in my 20s, I was working 24/7 in a law firm, and I love music, but I just couldn't find time to attend too many concerts, And when you have kids and family and raising kids, you don't have time. But if you've had that experience, like with your organization when they're young, like you did, Brian, you're going to be an engineer. You're going to be a very busy engineer. You're going to have a family. You're going to have kids or whatever it is. You may not be able to go back to the concert hall and support your orchestra. But when your kids are grown up, when you are in your 50s and maybe late 40s, when you're, set, when you're in a management position and where you don't have to work 24 hours a day, maybe then you say, oh, maybe I remember Dvorak New World Symphony. I used to love that symphony. And the Philharmonic's playing it. So I'm going to go buy tickets and go. And the reason you went is because you had a connection to the music when you were young. And that's the biggest challenge to classical music, is that we need to make sure that young people have access to it. Once you do, I think everybody knows that it's great art and everybody can appreciate it. So that's I think is the biggest challenge.
All right. Thanks for that, Ken. I think we have time for one last question from our audience. So we have one more question from Madam Jessica Lee. I think you've met her before. I think you may have talked with her before. So she's saying, "Hi Ken, thanks for sharing your musical journey with us. It'd be interesting to know if you still regard fondly to the very first piece of music you helped to conduct, and which piece was it?"
Yeah, I can tell you a story about that. As I was mentioning, I was in Hong Kong and the conductor didn't show up. And so I was asked to conduct that rehearsal. And the piece was Beethoven's Egmont Overture. And I did not have a baton. And so I used a pencil. So I always tell my students, never use a pencil. Because if it's Egmont Overture and that's a big downbeat, it goes like that, right? And so I was holding this this baton, which is a pencil,
Mhm.
and I gave an upbeat, and I did not have much technique back then. I had a lot of enthusiasm, so I gave an upbeat, and the pencil got stuck in my forehead.
Oh my.
And to this day, I don't know whether you can see, but there's still a bit of lead on my forehead, and that was my first upbeat.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, that must have been a really weird experience then. But yeah,
That was memorable.
yeah. But glad to hear that you've come a long way from using pencils then, if that's the case. So
Well,
yeah.
that was actually not the first, not the only time that I saw blood
Oh
with my conducting. You know, like Leonard Slatkin used to say, you know, he was conducting, I think, Firebird or something, and he was conducting, and then suddenly he couldn't see his baton, and then he saw just blood everywhere, and apparently he just stuck his baton right through his hand
oh my.
without even knowing it. Yeah, so it happens. It happens. You know, the French composer Jean-Baptiste Lully, you know, they didn't have batons, they had little batons, like sticks that they hit the ground before we used batons, you know. So literally they beat time with a huge rod, and he hit his foot, and it went septic, and he actually died from it.
Oh my.
So yeah, let's talk about accidents. So mine was a relatively minor one.
So technically, the position of a conductor still has its own occupational hazards then, if that's the case, like physical occupational hazards.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I think we've just about run out of time for today. So once again, thank you very much for your responses, Ken. I'm sure everyone was definitely very happy to hear all your stories and experiences. So once again, sorry everyone, but we are coming to the end of tonight's broadcast. We would like to remind everyone that our JPO family program will be broadcasted twice a week until further notice. So that's every Sunday and Wednesday nights, or in America it would be Sunday and Wednesday mornings, I suppose. So join us next time with our next guest, who will be revealed at a later date. More details on this can be found on our Facebook page. A video recording of tonight's broadcast will also be available on the JPO YouTube channel, alongside the past webinars and the soon-to-be broadcasted interviews. So feel free to share either the Zoom webinar registration link, the JPO Facebook page, or even the JPO YouTube channel with your friends and family. So for our YouTube audience, if you are enjoying our program, please show your support to us by pressing the like and subscribe button down below. So you guys have been an amazing audience, and we hope to see you all next time. We from the JPO family wishes that everyone stays safe and healthy as we continue to face this crisis together. So without further ado, I think I will now be leading the prayer to end tonight's program. So please pray in whatever faith that you believe in regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. We pray that everyone in the world continues to stay strong in surviving through these difficult times, and that a solution to the virus will soon be found. We pray that the governments across the world continue to improve upon their efforts and decision-making so as to protect their people and curb the spread of the virus. We pray for the safety and well-being of everyone working as we approach the end of September and as we continue to face the new surges of cases. We pray for the continued safety and morale of the frontliners who are continuously risking their lives so that they may continue to provide for those in need. And so, yeah, I think that about ends tonight's program. So once again, thank you, Ken, for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. You've been a great host.
Thank you. So good night, and we hope to see you all next time. See you. Oh, yep. So we have Satomi saying thank you for sharing as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Excellent.
someone's just saying thank you for sharing in the chat as well. So thank you, Satomi. Yeah.